Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Thursday, March 12th, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in L.A., he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Variety's Gene Mattis on the latest in Hollywood's union contract negotiations process. SAG-AFTRA has been in the room with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers for a few weeks. The Writers Guild of America is up next, starting on Monday. Gene will bring us up to speed on the buzz and the vibes coming out of the negotiating room in Sherman Oaks. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. Stewie takes the spotlight. A Family Guy spinoff featuring the show's foul-mouthed baby has been given a 2-season order by Fox. Disney's 20th television animation is producing. It's targeted to premiere next season. Universal Pictures has made a big U-turn in strategy. The studio has committed to keep its theatrical releases in theaters for a minimum of 5 weekends for the rest of this year. By 2027, it'll be up to 7 weekends. This is an about-face for the studio that trimmed its window to 17 days just a few years ago. It's a clear sign of the industry rallying to shore up the movie-going experience. Sony Pictures Television has consolidated all production under President Catherine Pope. Eli Holtzman and Aaron Seidman have exited their post as head of unscripted for the studio. All of that activity will now fall under Pope's supervision. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Gene Mattis, Variety's main man on the labor beat, brings us up to speed on where the talks stand. SAG-AFTRA is about to wrap up a few weeks of negotiations with the AMPTP. The Writers Guild is up next on Monday, and the WGA is scheduled to start on May 11th. The big question right now is, will SAG-AFTRA have a deal by the end of this week, or will they pause their talks while the AMPTP engages with the WGA? Gene Mattis, thanks for taking a minute to talk to me. You have been very busy keeping your eye on the contract negotiation situation for not 1, not 2, but 3 major unions.
Well, 4 if you count the Writers Guild staff union.
Yes, you are correct. The Hollywood labor situation is getting kind of meta right now. Earlier this week, you had a long conversation with the key players at the Writers Guild of America, Michelle Mulrooney, the president, Ellen Stutzman, the executive director, and John August and Danielle Sanchez-Witzel, who are leading the negotiating team for the Writers Guild of America. They have yet to sit down with the companies, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, but that day is coming, and you had an on-the-record conversation with them to get a sense of their priorities, their concerns. What did you learn, Gene?
The major thing was something we already knew, which is that healthcare is going to be the dominant subject of conversation. And really the question is, obviously the studios are going to contribute more towards healthcare. The question is, what are writers going premiums in terms of out-of-pocket maximums, that kind of thing. And so how much of cost saving is going to balance out the increase in contributions that the studios are going to make. So we didn't get a ton of new information about that. They did talk about their proposals in a couple of other areas on AI and on the free work issue, but those I feel like are going to be subordinate to the major theme, which is healthcare.
You really pressed them on some issues about the healthcare plan is in kind of similar situation to where it was in 2017, very much underwater, although the hole is deeper this time around. But I did see the reporting that you put in to looking at what happened then and what is likely to happen this time around. In talking to the WGA leadership about the health plan situation, did you get the sense that they had looked back at 2017 to try to figure out, like, what went wrong? How did this get so deep in the hole in terms of, remind us, what is the number that plan is in the red?
It was $122 million over 2023 and 2024 and more since then. So yeah, it's quite bad.
Of course, healthcare everywhere is a consistent problem across the country. Short of asking the studios to write a check, did you get any sense of any kind of creative proposal so that they don't consistently face these kind of shortfalls?
They made the point that that has been a traditional way of patching this up. So instead of getting a 3% raise, you might get a 2% raise, and that other 1% goes into the health fund. Like, that's a very standard union way to handle this kind of issue. It's just that the numbers are so big this time around that it's sort of hard to just resolve it with some little fiddling here and there. So the big difference, obviously, between now and 2017 is in 2017, we were talking about an expanding industry. So it's a problem that the health fund is losing money even while the business is going relatively well. But now we have a contracting industry. And so what you have is a bunch of writers got hired in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2022. And now all of those writers are not working, but they are on the health plan still, many of them. So they are contributing to the cost, but not contributing to the revenue, if that makes sense. And so that is the major structural problem that they're facing right now. And that is why the numbers are so large. And there could be some talk. I specifically asked about this issue of extended coverage points, where you can accrue over a career a large number of these points for years that you've worked and years that you've met certain earnings thresholds, and then you pay it down in the years when you don't have those earnings. And that's meant to keep people going in a freelance business where it's feast or famine sometimes.
Kind of a safety net, that makes sense.
Yeah, but in a time when basically the whole industry is upside down, a lot of people are using their points to get health coverage, but not doing work that contributes money into the health fund. So they might want to look at reforming that at some point. Now, what's going to happen, what the answer was when I asked about that, is we're going to see how much the companies want to give us, and then we'll know how much we have to make up on in terms of cost reductions. So that's what we're going to end up with at the end of this negotiation, is probably the largest number that's ever been given to the health fund, but then also another number that we'll find out later of cost reductions, and then it'll be up to the trustees of that fund to specifically figure out what the modifications are to the plan that are required to hit that number.
The devil will be in the details, and we know that the industry, the creative unions, are known for having Cadillac plans, and that in this environment is going to be where they're very sensitive to making even small changes. At the numbers that you're talking about, $120 million over 2 years, that is utterly not sustainable. It reminds me of what WGA National Executive Director Russ Hollander told me when I sat with him a couple of weeks ago. The number one issue is jobs, jobs, jobs. All of this is the related fallout of the fact that a great percentage of union members are not working after coming off of an environment when they had more work than they could accept in many years. So it's a real seesaw dynamic. I want to follow up with you on the issue of free work, because in your story you mentioned what a victory it was in 2023 for the Writers Guild to get what's called the second step for feature film writers, which is been a long standing, decades-old complaint that studios would get free rewrites and polishes out of writers if they really wanted to see their script advance. And in your conversation, they mentioned that this has started to creep into television. I found that interesting. How do you think they're going to address that at the table?
Well, the one specific thing they mentioned was the idea that basically the producer in a feature they want to designate that person as the studio's representative. And that's, we're getting a little into the weeds here, but basically what that means is if you hand your script into your producer, then it is considered delivered and submitted, and you are owed your payment for the first draft or whatever draft you're on. And typically what happens in real life without that provision is that it sort of goes back and forth between the producer. Oh, maybe you could fix this, maybe you could fix that. Yeah, you're right, maybe I should fix that. And there's a lot of extra work that goes on after the producer receives the script, and that is not paid as though it's another step. And so if you designate the producer as basically an agent of the studio, then any subsequent work after that would have to be paid. I don't know if the studios are going to go for that. Obviously, as we discussed, this is something that's been an issue for decades. It's been arbitrated. And the real thorny thing is there's not a unified consensus among writers about how to deal with this issue. So some writers are like, If the producer wants me to do a little extra work and it makes the script better, then it's in my interest to make the script better. Or if it makes it more likely it's going to get actually made, why wouldn't I do that? And they're happy to do it. And other writers are like, I'm not doing anything unless you pay me. And so getting all writers to take a firm, unified line on that has always been the challenge. So yes, they did get an incremental gain last time with the guaranteed second step. It only applies in certain circumstances under a certain income threshold. I think it's 200% of the minimum. So I think they'd like to expand the applicability of that guaranteed second step. That is intended to remedy what they call a one-step deal that has been very common since probably the late 90s that came in. And writers just hate that because basically you get one shot on the script and that's it. And they would like to be involved in an iterative way, and they would also like to be paid for the subsequent iterations. So that's what we're talking about. And then it's become an issue in TV because TV has taken on some of the development timeline of film, certainly in the prestige realm. And so it's taking longer and longer to get to a green light, and people end up writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and not getting paid for the rewrite.
Another unintended consequence of the massive change in the way television is produced. Well, you spoke with the Writers Guild just as they're gearing up for their sit down. Meanwhile, the AMPTP has been now in for a couple of weeks, has been talking to SAG-AFTRA, and I suspect that this is a case of the lack of fireworks, the lack of buzz about some issue coming out of the negotiating room, even though there is a media blackout on both sides. We all know that doesn't stop tongues from wagging privately, but it's been relatively quiet. Of course, there's been a lot of other things going on in the industry, but it's been relatively quiet coming out of Sherman Oaks, where the AMPTP has their headquarters and their purpose-built negotiating room. What is your basic sense of what's going on with SAG right now?
Well, basically, they're going to keep talking, I think, until Friday, and then they either have to have a deal or they're going to have to stop talking until June, because the writers come in on Monday. So it's anybody's guess, obviously, whether they get a deal or not, and maybe they don't know, but the sense I got was that things are being handled professionally, but not quickly. So obviously they've taken a few extra days already. So it may very well kick into June. There would be a little more leverage probably for the actors at that point anyway. So it might be in their interest to do that. It might be in the writers' interests also for SAG to kick into June, and that sort of keeps some of the pressure more on the AMPTP. So yeah, I would not at all be surprised if they come out on Friday and say, well, we've made some progress, but we're not there yet, and we'll come back when you're done with the writers and the directors.
We know that AI is a big issue for all three unions. For obvious reasons, it's really, really acute for actors, and the discussion of synthetic performers has not slowed down. And of course, the headlines out of the big AI companies have not slowed down. So once again, that is a big existential issue hanging over these negotiations. Have you heard anything about AI being a flashpoint in these discussions?
Yeah, I think definitely for SAG, it's probably their number one thing. Obviously, the strikes in 2023 were all about AI on some level, and they were pretty good in the sense of the deals that resulted from that kind of laid down the rules of the road in terms of, if we're going to incorporate AI, like, how will we do it? If AI is a tool, what does that look like? What are the rules for using that? And how do we make sure it doesn't undercut writers? How do we make sure it doesn't undercut actors? But actors can still license their voices if they want to, license their images if they want to, and you can make an AI version of James Earl Jones if you want to, and you pay his estate, basically. So all of those rules were kind of laid down, but what's unfinished about it is, well, what if I just take your performance and feed it into a soup of 50,000 other performances and then create a unique performance out on the other end of that doesn't look like anything that you guys created? And that's an issue for the writers. It's an issue for the actors. And basically, the studios did not agree to any restrictions on any of that. So I think from the writer's standpoint, from the actor's standpoint, that's still the big unfinished business from 2023 is like, how do we claim some control over our performances, our scripts being used to train AI? And so far, they don't have any control over that. And I think they would like to assert some control over that. So that is sort of the primary thing for SAG and one of the key things for the WGA.
Gene, thank you for monitoring it. Thank you for doing the reporting and knowing all the wonky, arcane things to ask to keep everybody on their toes. As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. You might have heard, but the Oscars are happening on Sunday. All you need to know can be found at Variety.com. Read my colleague Clayton Davis's predictions and peruse our voluminous coverage of the movies and the players in this year's race. It all comes to a head on Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific on ABC. Keep your eye on Variety.com for all the headlines you need. The South by Southwest Festival begins today in Austin, Texas. Variety has a big slate of events happening there, starting Friday with our True Crime Summit. Nancy Grace will kick it off in a conversation with our publisher, Dale Lawrence, who is an enormous true crime buff. If you're not in Austin, head to Variety.com for all of our coverage. We love to hear from our listeners, so please send thoughts, gripes, and other feedback about Daily Variety to podcasts@Variety.com. Before we go, enormous congratulations to Kevin Broderick and Christine So. Kevin is managing director of the Lippin Group, Christine is principal analyst at Paramount, and they both also answer to mom and dad. The two welcome their second child, baby boy Callum Owen Broderick, on March 5th. What a blessing. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Gene Mattis. Stick, snicks, hick, picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in Monday for another episode of Daily Variety.